This build will turn into a sun god, well, more like a bin god actually. Once you get this going, it will be turning your character into a walking being of death, annihilating everything that it touches. Hello, I'm Aruan, Community Manager at GameSmithing, and welcome to another Community Builds Highlights. This build makes use of a couple of different mechanics that allow for it to do big damage to everything around you. The most important one being debuffs on enemies, and the strongest one being Brittle, which increases the target's skill cooldown by 1% per stack and increases damage taken for 5 seconds. For our skills, we're going to be picking up Light Beam, which fires a continuous beam in the direction you're aiming at, dealing damage and applying Brittle. In the beginning, this doesn't look like much because you only got one beam going on, but it scales up pretty quickly. And one thing to know here is that this beam actually hits for a lot of hits per second once you really get it going. So this is important, not only because the amount of debuffs we're going to be applying, but because we are also going to be picking up Exorcism. So next up, we are also going to take Chromatic Bolt, which is an all-around useful skill. It's really powerful and decent damage, and it also ricochets to off-screen the monsters, which can be really handy. And next up is Exorcism. This skill is a must-have if you want to go deep into the endless modes, because it acts as a source of healing, and Exorcism deals moderate to low damage and heals you for 0.5 for each enemy hit. And in the game, actually, heal sources are very rare, so this is one of them. Heat Explosion is also in our shopping list, and it is an important pick here because this skill can have a gigantic AoE, and it is our source of turning burn stacks into melting. And differently from burn stacks, melting reduces armors by a flat amount and deals damage over 8 seconds, and it can go up to minus 300 armor, which is really powerful. You can imagine how this scales up with the rest of our damage, right? Ray of Fire is also a skill that is in the final build, and it will be another source of beams rotating around our character, kind of performing like a protective circle. This is our primary source of burn stacks on enemies, which will then get converted by Heat Explosion, and this is also the skill you're going to be starting with. And lastly, but not least, we're going to be taking Arcane Power to really pump up our multicast modifiers, since we're going to be taking lots of these and it is vital for the build to function properly. For this build, it is really important to pick up lots of crits and crit multipliers, since we're going to be scaling them nicely into the late game, thanks to our beams hitting the enemies a bunch of times all at once. And also because dots can crit, and this is really important, which ends up building up to ludicrous levels. Multicast and other sorts of dots, such as Poison and Bleed, are also welcome additions to the build, but I tend to shy away from the Bleed stacks and focus more on the Burn and Poison stacks, but both can be really useful and powerful too. Important debuffs for this build, as we talked about a little bit earlier, are Brittle, Dazed, Doom stacks, Frailty, and Exposed Weakness. These are all debuffs that will greatly increase the amount of damage we do, but the most important and most powerful one by far being Dazed, which will greatly increase the chances of receiving critical strikes per stack, second by Fragility stacks, which straight up just increases damage taken, which is really powerful and scales really well. I recommend that you banish holy skills that you're not going to be using for this build, such as Blade of Light, Sacred Orb, to increase the chances of us getting Exorcism as quickly as possible. For our character, we will be playing as the Elementalist here, since it inherently has both the Holy and Fire tags, and also provides a nice damage and area modifiers for our skills. We are going to be taking his blue third weapon, which will provide us with our starting skill, Ray of Fire, which is our source of burn stacks and another set of beams rotating around our character. And for runes, we will be taking Critical Mastery, which will help us reach some ridiculous levels of damage, since our crit chance is now added into our critical multiplier calculations. Generalist is also a great option for this build, because we're going to be using Chromatic Bolt, which has a lot of tags leading up to a big percent of damage. Executioner is also a must-have on this build, since we're going to be stacking lots and lots of debuffs on the enemies. And we're also going to be taking Skill Mastery Holy to make sure that we have access to one of the skills that we need in this build, which is Exorcism. Since we have one runic power left to spend, I actually like to take reroll mastery in these cases, but it's up to you. Once this build gets going, it is honestly one of the prettiest builds I've played. It gets crazy, leading to you looking at a gigantic Nova-like damaging area that surrounds your character. Now, thank you so much for Zanthyst Gaming for your contribution and the awesome guide. We'll be leaving his original build guide in the description of the video, so please go check him out. Good luck and have fun, survivors.